Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of D-Ray's Garage. Today we have Dennis joining us from Car Fanatic. Please check out his channel if you care at all about Porsches and 911s. Today, however, he's going to give his driving impressions of our Spyder. So I'm excited to see that, but in return, he's going to hand over the keys to the 911. So we'll give you some thoughts, tricks, processes, pricing, and all the other things that you might be considering if you're toying and making your entree into the P-car marketplace. Hey folks, welcome back to D-Ray's Garage, where today we have Dennis from Car Fanatics joining us to talk about Boxster 911. The age-old question of which one is right for me. So Dennis, I've got a few questions for you about your car. You've driven mine, I've driven yours, and I'm going to spend some more time with that today. But how long have you had your car, and when you were shopping for your Porsche, what were the thoughts you had, and what was the road you went down to get to where you ultimately did?
Yeah, thanks D-Ray for having me on the channel. So I have a 2010 911 Carrera S. I've had it since 2014, and it was my first Porsche. I really just enjoyed the 911 silhouette, and I've always wanted one. So in 2014, I picked it up. It had just under 60,000 miles. I think I paid $52,000 for it, and so far it's just been a great everyday usable sports car, and I've been having a lot of fun with it.
How long was your shopping experience? Or did you just know it was going to be a 997, you knew that your budget, and that was going to lock you into the road you went down?
Yeah, it probably took me about 2 months to find the right car. I think, a lot of that was just getting to know what are the different trims, the different options, and then looking for a car across the country and just waiting for the right one to pop up at the right price.
Did you test drive it?
No.
Or did you test drive any before? Obviously not that one, but did you test drive any of them? Or were you just, this is the car, hell or high water, love it or hate it, I'm owning this thing?
Yeah, I think it was more of the latter. So definitely my first Porsche, I think was probably too excited. I would definitely recommend test driving the car beforehand. I think fortunately it still worked out for me, but if you're going to spend that kind of money on a car, you should definitely test drive it first.
No, I know that feeling exactly. I mean, from my standpoint, I was, do I 911, do I Boxster? And test driving them back to back was most useful. I didn't have the stones you did to just buy one remotely. I was looking at a Boxster S or a Cayman S, frankly, based on coming from a Z4M that I rue the day I lost that car or gave it away, whatever you want to call that. And the decision ultimately for me came down to wearing the car. Like when I drive the Boxster, I feel like I'm wearing it. It feels like a more compact unit. When you drive the 911, especially back to back, the weight and the space become really apparent to me. So that's kind of where I fell to the Boxster, and perhaps because it felt more like the Z4M, size-wise and scope-wise.
But maybe I'll change your mind when you actually take it out for a spin. You're in the passenger seat, right? But when you drive in and you feel the slightly extra power and torque, you have a little bit more of an airy cabin, and you have some back seats that you can use. Maybe it'll change your mind.
Well, do you ever use those back seats?
Back seats, I use it mainly for storage. There have been a couple times where it's come in handy, where I had to give people unexpected rides somewhere, and then I, had the kind of funny experience of stuffing adults in the back and just watching their reaction. It's pretty funny. I mean, first reaction is like, oh, it actually has back seats, and then they get in the back, and then they're all like squish. So it's pretty funny. So yeah, every now and then.
Do you keep a pulse on the Porsche car pricing market and the secondary market still? Or have you just stopped
somewhat. Every now and then I'll do some random searches.
Because I do, and I think one of the things that probably will help you pick the car or help you push you towards one is, while I've seen it come up, the Caymans and the Boxsters now, I mean, Caymans are rarer, they're definitely more popular, being held on to more, but if you want this mid-engine P-car, 2008 to 2011 vintage, you're going to pay 25 grand. 6-8 months ago, you're going to pay 20. Now, if you're going to buy a 9971 or a 9972, do you have a pulse on what that might cost? Is it 50, 45, 50? I mean, it's a different price bracket altogether.
Yeah, I think if you're going with a base model 997 with, let's say, 30 or 40,000 miles, you might be paying in the mid-30s for that car. If you are finding one with higher miles, it is possible to find them in the high 20s, but I think those opportunities are far and few between. You can get a 997S model with low miles, probably around 40,000. And then as you get up to the 997.2s, a low mileage 997.2 Carrera S, let's say 30,000 miles, would still fetch, I think, in the mid 50s, which is quite good. And when I was purchasing my car, a low mileage 997.2 was in the mid 50 to high $50,000 range, and it's been 5 years later, and the prices have been roughly consistent with what they were 5 years ago.
Now, I think this is the crux of the matter for me. When I think about buying a car, and it's any car, I think about use case. Now, for me, this is the weekender. I think you have a secondary car, which is your Cayman, right? Which you work on a lot. What was your use case when you went to the 911? Oh, was this pure passion? I've earned my way here. This is the car I'm getting, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, it was more of, I think, the latter of just getting a car to enjoy on the weekends. I was in the Bay Area at the time and wanted to have a fun weekend car. And this is after taking a probably 3 or 4 year break from actually owning a stick shift car. So definitely wanted to get back into a fun car.
Yeah, that is interesting. We both do have the stick shift flavor of transmission in our cars, and I think we both also installed the short shift kit, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So rowing the gears is definitely, in my opinion, especially if it's a secondary car, and it's your jam. It's not for everyone, but I would definitely say, for me at least, and I won't speak for you, Dennis, but it's just more engaging. The other thing I found is it's not that it's not fun to drive any of these cars, but when you're rowing the gears, you just feel like you're more tied in. And remember the comment earlier I made about wearing the car? I think the gear stick is an extension of that experience. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna drive or if you're gonna buy a Porsche and you want to have fun with it every single day and you don't have to sit in traffic, the stick shift is definitely the way to go. It'll be engaging each time you drive it.
All right, so here we are in the 911 Carrera S 997.1, right? 2, my bad. Oh my gosh. They were so offended. So we're in the .2. So basically, he's got that one extra digit. I'm 987, he's 997.2. So the second iteration of this particular model. So definitely, I just did a launch and missed that, but there's a lot of push power. So you feel the power further deeper into the cabin, and the shove is definitely different and more violent. I don't know if it's because of the disconnection from my butt to the motor, or if that's just the nature of the difference between the 911 driving and the Boxster Cayman series. So that was very interesting. The cruising feels very similar. The driving, the steering, it's just a hydraulic rack in the .2. So the hydraulic, what do they call that? The term is telepathic steering, I think I've heard for these racks. Definitely feels very similar there. I do selfishly enjoy, and I'll put up on there, the 5 dials. If there's one thing that I wish I had in the Boxster, it's the extra dials there. I really enjoy that feedback. Yes, I can get them through the cob access port, but nothing's really difficult to read when you're driving, and just having all those controls, especially, when you're on an autocross day or a track day, you just want more information, or at least I do. Maybe that's not for everyone. The gearing is very similar. Short gear in first gear though, and then second gear is a little bit longer, I've noticed, whereas in the Boxster, the first and second gears were both very long.
And I'll just jump in and say they make it very long to actually create more space between 0 to 60 times between the two cars.
So it's a manipulation, people. One thing that we observed earlier on was that there are many shared parts. So when you look down the center console, when you look at the controls themselves, very, very similar. The doors, the whole interior has a very familiar feel to me, and definitely a comfortable just jumping in and driving. The gearbox, a little bit different. I don't even know if that's because of the actual model differences or what we've done to them. So that's a TBD, I'm not sure, but there's definitely a more springy, eager to get from one gear to the next in the 911 here. So I'm going to tackle here some lower speed tight turns and see how it feels in the turns. I just feel myself shifting a little differently, and so that expression that I find myself coming back to is wearing the car.
Yeah.
I feel like this is just a little bit more of a cavernous experience here, and so I'm moving more, and the car is just feeling that the extra junk in the trunk, if you will, as we're driving around here. And that junk is giving the power from those launches for sure.
Yeah, and with the engine being further out back, I think you'll feel the weight shifting. And when you drive it on a track or autocross course, you have to kind of be mindful of where the weight is and what it's doing at the time. For example, if you take a hard left turn, you then have to let it settle a bit before you take a hard right. So you definitely have to manage that weight a little bit.
Yeah, I do think there's a more deliberate driving required when you're putting those dynamics to the test in this car versus mine, which I think even you felt when we did the autocross together that the car was doing a lot of the work, or it was naturally inclined to be put where I was putting it, whereas yours you had to wait and let the weight move around with you for the driving dynamic.
Yep. I don't know, here if you wait for it to clear, you might be able to give it
the beans.
Yeah. Maybe after these motorcycles.
I can get out, yeah.
Point it straight ahead. You'll definitely feel it throw you back. What'd you think of that?
Yep, power's there.
So the power is definitely pretty good, but when I was at the track, I definitely felt like I could use more power. But then again,
in the straightaways, or
yeah, that particular course I think is very friendly to cars with high horsepower. So I can definitely use a little bit more power, and probably a PDK would help make as much use of the 385 horsepower in this car.
So I kicked Dennis out of his car so we can talk about what's really going on here in the 911. Just kidding. It is kind of fun watching your own car follow you in the rear. There's no doubt about it. They're both very good-looking cars, and you really can't go wrong. That's definitely somewhat of a conclusion, and I think, again, just coming full circle, your use case really determines it. Will there be a time where you need to carry a little person for the back? Is there, or will that come up enough that it would bother you not to have that functionality? Do you like the shove of the rear engine? It's different to any car I've driven, any other car, and that's obviously a reason that Porsche have kept this, and it's the flagship car in their entire portfolio, because it is such a unique feeling car and drive. And so the iconic nature of the 911, I get it. I totally get it. Would I surrender the Spyder today if we get back here and then Dennis says, okay, let's just trade keys? I think we'd both say no. I do. Now, trade keys for the week, all day, every day. I would also say that if you're interested in the racing aspects, and I think Dennis touched on this too, if you want to autocross, probably the Spyder. If you want to track, maybe the 911. I think that the biggest failing you will see, and it is by design, I have no doubt about it, is the fact that the straight line power of a Boxster Cayman is just never going to be this. And the straight line power of Porsches in general, let's be honest, that is not what they hang their hat on. It's not the core function of their marketing pieces. Sure, they have fast straight line cars. That's not, don't misunderstand or misinterpret what I'm saying there. But they're really all about driving dynamics. If the weight distribution, that's got to be the main difference between these two cars. Because when I, fiddle around with the Spyder, everything moves in unison. And with the 911, there are additional factors to consider. And yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's a strange kind of extension of the turn or extension of the movement, pitch, roll, all those things together. Again, none of it's dramatic. Obviously, it's a very tight chassis, but when compared to the butt dyno one to the other, when I do this in my car, it all moves together. My butt's moving with the car. With this, there's just this slight disconnection of timing where I think like a snake's slithering more, if that's a good way to look at it. Whereas if you use the Boxster, you've got a ruler just turning like this. So I don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but that's how I think of it now. I do take Dennis's point that you're riding a little bit at a more traditional car height here. So obviously I have my car lowered. It sits lower anyway, being the Spyder. It sits lower because I got the coilovers on there and set it a little bit lower. So it's a more squat car all around, so everything is lower. And so I think that does add to the sensations and the sportiness in the Boxster, that some of the impressions that I felt Dennis was speaking to. Alright, I'm going to grab on this, gonna do a little bit of a runway here if I can on the on-ramp. Hopefully there's room to do this. Coming down that on-ramp in a straight line, I suddenly had an awareness of the weight, and that awareness came with a little kind of strike of anxiety. Now some of that is I'm not familiar with the car, and some of that is probably a realization that you do always have to be a little bit more focused when driving this particular vehicle. I'm going to stiffen up the suspension here. And it's moving with me. So I think some of that, the differential that I was talking about in the pitch and roll, really has been mitigated by hitting the magical suspension button in here. So there is still a little bit of kind of a two steps on the Snake now versus the Few, but it's moving more directly. It's definitely got a tighter feel to the Rat. And now I feel the momentum too, so that's an interesting sensation here on the highway. Now we're up at speeds. It feels like the car has just got momentum, whereas in my car you generally have to stay on throttle to keep pace. One thing that I feel different about this 997 versus the 991s is this doesn't feel as I don't know, forgive the expression, bloated as the 991s do. I think many people have said this, and I do feel the differences to the 911's migration to be more of a touring car, at least in their Carrera S lines. So we made it back, and both cars in one piece, no less. I think we're both a little wiser for our experiences. If you have questions, comments, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever in between, I think we'd like to keep this discourse going. It is a common question, and it's a tricky one to answer. There are no right answers, there are no wrong answers, unless of course you buy a Yugo. So thanks for checking in, everyone. Be memorable, be well, and we'll see you next time.